Hi, I'm Kris Spisak, author most recently of The Baba Yaga Mask, a novel with my own Ukrainian roots at its core. But today we're not here to talk about me or my books. Today I am honored to have a conversation with Ukrainian voices telling Ukrainian stories about art and history and aid and so much more. And it all begins in 30 seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Story Stop United for Ukraine. Again, I am Kris Spisak. I'm here with Andrea Kulish. Welcome.
Hello, good evening.
And I will tell you a little bit more about Andrea in a moment, but whether you are here to learn about Ukrainian culture, whether you are here to explore and be inspired by Ukrainian artistry and traditions, or whether you're here to consider how you can help, welcome and thank you. And I'm so thrilled to have Andrea here with me because not only is she an amazing Pisinke artist and an amazing fundraiser to help the people of Ukraine, especially in the most recent weeks and months, but she's just a pleasure to spend time with. So Andrea, thank you for being here. And I was wondering if you could just start us off with, why do you think that speaking to Ukrainian folk arts is such an important conversation now more than ever?
Thank you so much, Kris, for having me here tonight. I'm so excited to be here. I feel that Ukrainian folk art and culture is so important to be shared right now for many reasons. One being that Ukraine, of course, is at the forefront of the news, and people all over the world who may have never heard of Ukraine, or maybe they didn't know where it was. People are learning all about Ukraine now, and our traditions, our customs, our art and craft, music, everything is so rich. Our culture is so beautiful, and it needs to be out there and shared with the world. And this is the perfect time for people to learn about it.
Absolutely. And I feel like I am someone who grew up seeing the beauty, but not always appreciating the symbolism and depth of Ukrainian traditional folk art. And I love that you can have this conversation and learn so much more about our own heritage, but also to share this with others. And of course, this is a fundraiser tonight. So I would like to invite onto camera a representative from the Ukrainian National Women's League of America, Oksana. So take us away.
Hi, I'm Oksana Loju-Kruvulich, and I'm a member of the executive board of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. Currently, I'm the fundraising chair for our organization. Our organization was established in 1925 and is the longest running and largest Ukrainian women's organization in the United States. Our mission has always been to promote and develop educational and cultural efforts and to provide humanitarian assistance to Ukrainians worldwide. With the unprovoked war in Ukraine, our focus has turned to provide humanitarian assistance to war-torn Ukraine. We have been accomplishing this primarily in three ways. We are providing both funding and purchasing medical equipment and supplies and sending them over to various hospitals in Ukraine. We are also assisting in evacuating orphans. We have successfully evacuated orphans from the east that we had been supporting for many years, and we have evacuated them to Germany. And currently we are also supporting orphans in Turkey, 2,000 orphans, 10% of them have special needs. The cost to house them is great. It's about $10 per orphan per day. So that's $20,000 per day to house them. And we are trying to raise funds for this purpose. And lastly, we are also providing humanitarian assistance largely through an organization called AICM. That's an NGO based in Kyiv, Ukraine. And they're providing both medical supplies, shelter, food, clothing, etc., everything that is needed for civilians that are displaced and are in need in Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Those of you who are watching us live, those of you who are tuning in after the fact, I'm dropping into the comments a link for where you can go to donate to help this effort, to help all of the people who need help medically, orphans who are finding new homes, who have been displaced from Eastern Ukraine, who are in Germany and all over the place. As Oksana was just saying, that link is available for you now. And of course, if that link on Facebook, it's a Facebook donation link, is ever hard to get to for you, you can always go to babayagamask.com, and I have a nice, easy donation link for you right at the top of that page as well. So thank you everyone for your time, for your support. And let's dive into our event. Andrea, I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about your family's Ukrainian story?
Thank you so much, Kris. All of my family is originally from Ukraine. My parents, my grandparents, and all of their siblings were from Ukraine. I was born in this country, but all I spoke until I was 3 was Ukrainian. I was fluent, and my parents told me I spoke perfect, beautiful Ukrainian as a 3-year-old. I grew up immersed in Ukrainian culture, and it was such a beautiful way to grow up. I grew up in the church, and my mother was an artist. My father and grandfather were both Ukrainian Orthodox priests, and there was culture all around in our house, at church, in our community. And I loved growing up this way. The culture was so enriching and such a beautiful part of my life, and still is, of course.
All right, thank you so much. I love hearing Ukrainian stories. As I said, my own family's story is what inspired the novel that I just wrote. It inspires so many pieces of who I am between the lines of my life that you don't even realize how much kind of comes from those who come before you. I had the opportunity to ask this question to another wonderful guest today, and here is what she said.
My name is Anna Dudic-Tuchula. I am a folk artist, if I can say that in the most humblest of ways. I grew up in Chicago, the daughter of immigrants who came from the displaced persons camps in Germany after World War II. They waited for about 3 to 4 years to come here and built an incredible life once they came. My parents were from a little area outside of Lviv called Yavoriv, and they met in the displaced persons camp, started a family, and came here. I grew up, like many daughters and sons of immigrants of Ukrainian heritage, as a lover of a country and a culture that I did not know that I would be able to go and experience. I grew up loving Ukraine, loving Ukrainian culture, loving Ukrainian traditions, growing up speaking Ukrainian probably until I got into first grade. So we even had a Ukrainian kindergarten that I attended, Ukrainian school that I attended in Chicago. And it was a complete sort of tapestry of being Ukrainian and American at the same time. Growing up, our traditions were, like I said earlier, interwoven. Going to church, going to the Ukrainian American Youth Association, going to the dance ensembles, participating in all of those camps. It was entirely part of my heritage. So growing up Ukrainian was very much who I was. Growing up in the Ukrainian community, these traditions were part of your everyday and your holiday experience. So making pisanke, writing pisanke, started at a very young age. And learning how to embroider started at a very young age. It was part of something that we did, part of something that was praised, part of something that was really integral to being Ukrainian. As I grew older, and when I was in high school, it became very popular in the Ukrainian community in Chicago to show off, as you were getting older, your talent with pisanki, with Ukrainian Easter eggs. And so you would work really hard, you would show off. I would write these pisanki with my mother, my brothers also who were much older than I. My mother taught them as well. And you would learn the different things that were important in that area. My parents being from Yavori, there was a specific style that she liked to write every year. We were gifting them to friends. And growing up, we always embroidered. It was something that was very important to us. But it became more important to me as a young woman when I had the opportunity to take master classes with a very well-known Ukrainian teacher here in Chicago. Her name was Tanya Renorovich. And she presented not just the proper techniques, because to learn a technique is perfectly fine. You can just repeat a pattern that you see. But she taught it as an art form. She treated it with great respect. I think sometimes Ukrainian embroidery at the time was very valuable to Ukrainians, but it didn't necessarily translate to other, cultures, or, it was very nice, but it didn't necessarily was very stylish because it was just, they're behind me. Those are a little bit more modern designs, but to treat it as an art form, to respect the colors of the thread and the design, so you know the origin of where it came from, but to be able to sort of transform it, respect it, have it a little bit more contemporary, and still have all of the traditional designs. Also, as a young woman, I was very active in the Ukrainian community. I had finished my Saturday studies in Chicago. We had at St. Nicholas School, Rідна школа, при парафії Святого Миколая, we had a program where you completed your higher courses. So I actually had an opportunity to do my matura in Chicago. So that got me language credits at the University of Illinois. So being very active in the Ukrainian community, being very active in the Ukrainian American Youth Association, being active in their dance ensemble, when they were in the 80s, we traveled throughout the United States and Canada, and then we had an opportunity to perform at Epcot Center for a week. So we traveled with the dance ensemble. It was great camaraderie, great fun, an opportunity to share our culture and to share our love of the things that are Ukrainian. So it's very important for me to share my culture and my heritage, not so that we can find the differences amongst each other, but so that we can find the commonality. Growing up in Chicago, a city of neighborhoods, I grew up next to a Mexican family and next to an Italian family. And my mother, in her broken English, when she first got here and they were living there, was able to communicate, talk about family, talk about kids. My mother shared her techniques of embroidery with our Mexican neighbor. My Mexican neighbor taught my mother all of her little techniques. We had wonderful Italian recipes from my Italian neighbor. So it was just finding the commonality, finding the thing that connected us. So for me, it's really important for people to understand how we are more similar than different. And I think when we have that more similar than different connection, we can solve problems, we can build things, we can build bridges, we can resolve issues, and we can, really address what's going on in Ukraine now.
Thank you so much, Anna. And addressing things that are going on in Ukraine right now, absolutely. I wanted to thank our first couple donors who have really been stepping up. So thank you to Lou, thank you to Elaine, thank you so much. Every little bit helps our cause. So thank you very much. And I wanted to continue our introductions with our fourth speaker of the night, Athena.
My name is Athina, and I was born and raised in Ukraine. I came to the United States when I was a teenager to pursue my artistic American dream. Back in Ukraine, ever since I remember myself, we used to always do pisanki. So pisanki, it's a tradition that we usually do for Easter. They look like this. I have all different types. So, and each design means something, whether it's wealth or health, happiness. So each one of those symbols has a meaning behind it. So we don't always just do pisanki right before Easter. It became such a beautiful tradition. Then after a while, we actually started doing pisanki maybe a couple of months before by emptying out the eggs and preserving them. And then throughout the years, we have the huge collection of eggs. So that was the very, very main tradition that I grew up doing since I was a baby, and my whole family did the same. So also, since I'm an artist, I do a lot of different other paintings. So I do a canvas art as well. It wasn't as popular in my life when I was a teenager, but throughout the years, I started to develop that skill a little bit more. But back in Ukraine, I remember myself when I was growing up a teenager during the Soviet Union days, so before USSR broke down. And it was a very different regime, a lot different than it is now. So when I was going to an art school during the Soviet regime, it was very limited of what we could do. So because it's only a certain way that you had to paint, and this is the only way. And you won't. And if you actually get to the same result using different techniques, the teacher would fail you. And I like to do a lot of art my own way, so it was actually very hard for me to go to the art school back during the Soviet days. But a lot of things have changed ever since USSR broke down, because Ukrainians, they are a lot more open to new creative ideas, to new look on things. And I have noticed that the limitations were a lot more limitless after USSR broke down, when I was finally able to explore my inner self as an artist and try different other techniques, which was really amazing.
Thank you, Athina. And it really does make you think about what freedom means, and is something as simple as how art is created. Again, thank you for those who have donated to help the cause already. Thank you to those of you who are thinking about it. You know you want to help the cause. Every little bit helps. Andrea, I want to bring you back up onto screen. Athina started speaking a little bit about your specialty, about pisanka, about Ukrainian Easter eggs and this format. I was wondering if you could come up onto screen and speak a little bit of your memories of how you learned this art, and then how you love teaching your students today.
Thank you, Kris. So I have very vivid memories of learning pisanki from my mother. She was an artist, and she taught pisanki classes in her store. She had a Ukrainian gift store in Hudson, New York, and she also sold arts and crafts and did stained glass. She did all kinds of things. And every spring she taught pisanki workshops, and I would sit in on her classes as a little girl. I started when I was 5, and I would just sit there and write eggs and just listen to everything my mother was teaching and go from there. I had a favorite design that I did every week, and then I did other ones as well. And I still have a few of the ones I made when I was young. And it's my life's mission now to share pisanki with the world. I love to teach. I teach in my studio. I have a working studio / gallery in the River Arts District here in Asheville. And I teach people there, people from all over the world. And we have a lot of tourists here in Asheville and also locals. And I also travel and teach. Today I taught at a Slavic music conference here in Asheville, and that was really wonderful. Yeah, so I feel like it's my life's work. It's so meaningful to me. I've just loved and cherished this tradition since I was a young girl. And every pisanka that I make is a link to my family, to my mother, to my father. They're now deceased, so it's extra special and extra meaningful to me. Also to my grandparents. And it's a link to all of Ukraine, all of my ancestors. People love when I share the culture, the traditions, the symbols. They love the stories, the legends, and people love to make them.
Thank you so much. And I completely agree. I feel like it's fascinating and fun. And what have you painted on eggs lately? Or excuse me, what have you written on eggs lately?
Exactly. The word pisanki is from the Ukrainian word pisata, and it means written eggs. I've been doing a lot of blue and yellow pisanki, and I donate money to help Ukraine. People donate money and I'll give them an egg. And a lot of symbols for health, protection, of course, all the symbols that Ukraine really needs right now, strength, etc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's funny is after I have had the joy of connecting with you, with Anna, who is with us on this conversation, I realized that a newspaper that I had found back from April is this article on Pisanka, on Ukrainian Easter eggs. And I realized in the artistry of this conversation, it was written by Anna, who is a part of our conversation here tonight. So here is my wonderful segue. I love this conversation about art, about family, about symbolism. And Anna also has some things, some ideas to share about embroidery as well, because there are many Ukrainian folk art traditions, and embroidery is another one. So thank you very much, Andrea, and let's chat with Anna about embroidery.
In 1988, at the millennium of Ukrainian Christianity, there was an exhibit with the textile museum where our works were presented. I actually still have the piece. It is here in front of me. It is a specific stitch. It's a running stitch. And the things that we contributed to that exhibit were all very ancient traditional stitches. So a lot of the stitches were running stitches, different kind of nabidovanya stitches. Cross stitch is actually a more recent stitch. And that is something that once that started, a lot of designs were translated into cross stitch because it was quicker to embroider. The embroidery that is very dear to me is actually embroidery from sort of my mother's area from Yavoriu. It's specific colors, it's a specific type of stitch, and it's very familiar. My mother loved it, so I loved it. One of the things that's very dear to me is when my mother, who loved to embroider, and that was her zen, that was her go-to to relax and to detox. She lost all of her worries and her stress. She would lose herself in the design and embroider. When my mother left Ukraine to go be Ostarbeiten, to be forced labor in Germany during the war, the one thing that she took with herself was, it was actually an embroidered chustka. So this is actually an embroidered scarf, a headscarf that my mother had brought with her from Ukraine. And so this is one of my treasured things because it belonged to her sister Hanusia, which is my nickname in Ukrainian. So this is something that they would have worn. And it is one of the things that I inherited from my mother, in addition to her great love of embroidery. there was a resurgence of, I think in the late 80s, of Ukrainian embroidery, because a lot of designers at the time had been using that in fashion. So it became very popular. A lot of events, dances and dinner dances focusing on people wearing embroidery in Ukrainian culture. I know this happens in New York. It happened in Ohio. It happened in Chicago. It would be Vishivni Vachadnici. You would come wearing your embroidery. And my mother had actually had several dresses made. And for each wedding in my family, my mother had, I think, an embroidered dress made. That dress that's there right now, my mother had designed and embroidered and wore to my debutante ball. I wore it in a fashion show that was a fundraiser at the Ukrainian National Museum, Chicago. And then I had that portion incorporated into my dress for my daughter's debutante ball. So I'm a twin, and I had twins. I was lucky enough to have twins. And so this is part of the legacy. It was really important for me because I had lost my mom by that point. My parents died in 2012, to have a part of her with me. And that was how I could do that. As I said, it was just, embroidery is always sort of with you. It's a great touchstone. I know from, as I used to work at the Ukrainian National Museum, many of the stories that I learned there have embroidery, have vishitya tied to your life story. So it isn't so much the type of embroidery, because it's all regional. You love your embroidery from, like, if your mother loved something, you probably really like it. And there were many influences. Central Ukraine has more tree of life. Hutsal has more geometric. Yavoriu had a lot of, reds and yellows and black. But the thing that's important, and maybe the symbolism, embroidery follows you your whole life. When you're born, lots of times you are wrapped in a rushnik that's embroidered for your baptism. When you are married with embroidery. So you have 7 pieces that you should have at your wedding. And I did have 7 pieces at my wedding. You have a rushnik, which is an embroidered towel that you stand on. You have one that binds your hands, and then you walk around the altar 3 times. You have one for your korovai, which is your wedding bread. You have one each for the matchmakers, for the starosta and starostenia, and you have one each for the icons that they hold. So you have all of that embroidery there. That's a little rushnik. And then you have those icons are actually the icons then you have in your home on display. And then you have a rushnik that covers your Easter basket. You have a rushnik that you can have decoratively. And I know that in ancient times, or in not recent times, but in Ukraine, they would lower the coffin on a rushnik. So you would be lowered on linen, and that would be from cradle to grave, from beginning to end. You have all of that embroidery. And embroidery actually is sort of your armor. So Sorok is actually 40, is a very mystical number. It's mystical in Easter eggs. It's mystical in general. It's mystical with the Ukrainian woman's blouse called sorachka. So 40 is 40 days of Lent, 40 days after someone passes, we have the memorial service. When you embroider your blouse, your sorachka, you have 40 graces that come to you. So there's even a myth of 40 larks or 40 birds coming to herald spring. So there's many things that are tied to 40, and especially with sorachka. So a sorachka is something that you would have embroidered for yourself. You would have been married in it. And many times women would be buried in the embroidered sorachka that they were married in, so that their husband would recognize them in heaven.
That's such a fascinating concept. And one phrase in particular that Anna said there was this idea of embroidery as armor. So I wanted to dig in a little bit more on that, Anna.
I know that the trend since February, there were times when many times Ukrainian soldiers and many times Ukrainian volunteers who were fighting would wear their embroidery underneath their military camo. So it is very much a part of identity. Different areas of Ukraine, of course, are very, distinct, just like New York doesn't look like California. Kiev embroidery doesn't necessarily look like Lviv, it would look like Hutsul or Lamko. So it unifies us, it identifies us, it sort of helps you to remember that continuation. For me personally, whether it's embroidery, whether it's pesanke, whether it's making a pavuk, a straw decoration, all of those things remind me that hundreds, maybe 1,000 years ago, there was a woman who wanted to beautify her surroundings and to express herself, express the things that were important to her. And she created these things and she passed them on. So it is, very much matriarchal as far as creativity, very much preserving the culture. I know and I respect the part of, the cultural aspects that Ukrainian men, pass on. There's a lot of woodworking, dervoris, but there's an entire set that they contribute. And I respect that very much and I acknowledge that. But I think it's really important, the things that the mother can teach the children and really instill that love of culture, love of heritage, love of, community, whether that's in Ukraine or here in the Ukrainian community in the diaspora. But I think all of those things, I harken back to that time when that woman, 1,000 years ago was embroidering something and hoping that, she would get it right and make it as beautiful as she wanted it to be.
I love that so much. This whole idea of passing down from one woman who started, and it all started building from there, creating something beautiful, creating something with meaning. And here's where I want to bring Athena back into our conversation, someone who is a contemporary artist pulling on her Ukrainian roots. Athena.
So my Ukrainian heritage definitely influenced me as an artist, of course, by painting in Easter eggs, because I have never seen anyone in America to do the same type of art as we do, because the way how we paint Easter eggs is with beeswax and food coloring. And we don't really apply any stickers on it, or we don't use acrylic paint, so everything is edible. So it's definitely one tradition that I keep going through generations and generations and years after years using the same exact technique. As far as in my canvas, especially nowadays, since the war started 3 months ago, I have been doing a lot of Ukrainian-inspired pieces. I am pro-activist, and the way I speak through my brush and through my paints. And I think it will be a useless art if it doesn't tell the story, and if it doesn't make a difference, and if it doesn't make you feel something. So, and I make a difference with my art. And actually the piece right behind me, it actually speaks for itself. It's a very controversial piece. It's a acrylic on canvas, and all of these pieces are inspired by Ukraine and what Ukraine is going through and the rough times that we're going through, but we will win. And all of my pieces nowadays have been Ukrainian inspired with Ukrainian symbolics, and I have been selling a lot of these pieces, and all of the proceeds are going towards helping people in Ukraine, and we are buying a lot of stuff, shipping everything to Ukraine so Ukraine can win as soon as possible.
Thank you, Athena. And it's a spirit that I've just sensed through all of these conversations of determination, of joy amid anything that might be coming. It's something I'm in awe of, something that I have always appreciated about all of the Ukrainians I have known since I was a child. I want to ask Andrea a question. We've been talking so much about different types of artistry, pieces of our heritage. Now, why do you think we need to speak about Ukraine and Ukrainians right now? This is such an important conversation. And what would your kind of What do you think the world needs to know about Ukraine right now?
I feel like the world needs to know that Ukrainians are very resilient. I think a lot of people know that. Ukraine won't give up, and our cultural tradition is so rich, and it's part of everyday life, but it's also part of the war. As Anna said, soldiers are wearing the embroidery as an armor under their uniforms. They also have musical instruments out there on the battlefield with them. And music is such a part of Ukrainian culture. And sorry, it's just getting a little bit choked up.
It's understandable. No, it's absolutely understandable. This is a big conversation, and it's hard to even digest the reality of what is actually happening right now. There's those of us who grew up with family stories around the dinner table that were hard to conceive of when we were children, where we understood war and we understood fighting for freedom and Ukrainian identity and Ukrainian language and culture. And we understood this. I understood this as a young child, that there was a fight, but it didn't perhaps hit us all as hard as it is until recent months, or maybe that's just me.
It seems that way. It seems because Ukraine has had such a long history of oppression that goes so far back, and always fighting for freedom and democracy. And the thing most people say now is, who would have thought in this day and age that this could happen again? I think it's such a shock, and people are just in disbelief that what is happening to innocent civilians, totally unprovoked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I asked Athena the exact same question on what does the world need to know right now? Because if anything else in this conversation, we need to teach about Ukrainian stories. We need to teach about Ukrainian heritage, and just to see Ukrainians for who they are. And here's what Athena had to say.
So what would I like the world to know? That the war is not over. The war continues. And we need help. We need help from the world to help win this war, to stop the crimes against humanity. Because Ukraine is a shield to Europe, is a shield to United States. And we need to stop this monster before the war spreads further. So we need help from every single person under the sun in order to make Ukraine win and for the world to be in peace all over again. So it can be either financial donations or just awareness, post on your social media, you wearing a Ukrainian flag pin, or maybe you're putting a sticker on your car, anything to raise the awareness that the war still continues and people still die. And we need this to stop.
Thank you, Athena. And Anna, how about you? Final words from you.
Thank you so much for, the opportunity to talk about things that are important to me and my experiences growing up Ukrainian in the diaspora. I would very much like to share my culture and my heritage with the world so that the world does not see us as victims. We are, of course, in a horrible war, not of our choosing and not of our making in Ukraine right now. And it is important that we don't lose sight of that. But I would love to be able to share with the world the Ukraine that I experienced when I went back to visit with my parents in 1993, and the joy that I had and the deep culture that I found there that inspired me more. I went back with my daughters in 2019 and was able to show them a Ukraine that was even more dynamic, more beautiful, just the enthusiasm of the people, the kindness, the talent, the joy they had for life and living, the contributions that they make. I think that when we can share the multidimensional aspect of Ukrainians, whether in Ukraine or here in the States or in Europe or in other countries, there is a resilience that we have from years of persecution, decades of hundreds of years of persecution, that have taught us to hang on so tight to our culture and heritage and to share it. Because if we just hold on to it, it's beautiful for us and it's important to us. But when we share our culture and when we can find commonality with other cultures, then we find that they also fall in love with our culture. The beauty of just the geography, the beauty of the people, the music, the dance, the embroidery, the pisanke, all of those aspects. We have so much to share with the world. We've shared so much and we have more to share, and we are absolutely worth fighting for. I truly believe that. I think the world is stepping up and I'm very grateful for that. But we're more than victims. We are your brothers and sisters here in the world. And we connect with you. I think that's the thing that's really important to me. So I've done podcasts. We've had newspaper articles. We've done, television shows and news shows. And I will go anywhere to talk about this when I can, because I think it's really important to share growing up Ukrainian. Not very many people knew who Ukraine was, what Ukrainian was. And it's always been important to share what that is in the most genuine way possible, and to make it available to answer anything, share food, share music, share dance, share all of that, so that they fall in love with our culture like we love our culture. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Anna, for joining us here. And also thank you those who have stepped up to make donations through this live event. Of course, thank you to those who are making donations after the end of this recording as well. But I want to do a special thank you also to Janet, to Georgie, to David. Things are rolling in at this point. So thank you very much. I'm going to try to keep up here right before we say our ending. I also wanted to say a special thank you to Andrea. I'm going to pull you back up here. As you can tell through this evening, we've had a mix of live and recorded chats. I forgot to say that early on. And may I say, Andrea, if you did not see the bio that I posted as we were getting ready for this event, Andrea has helped raise over $52,000 in Ukrainian aid over the past couple months. You are a powerhouse, and thank you so much for everything you have done. Thank you for joining me here. Would you like to have any final closing words?
Thank you, Kris. I would just like to add that so many people in Ukraine need help right now, and just that every little bit adds up. Every donation counts. And with my fundraising, a lot of it has been small things, stickers, eggs, all those little things really add up. So your donations help displaced people with basic needs, water, food, shelter, and it also help wounded soldiers and civilians with medical care and life-saving medical equipment. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching and for your donations.
Thank you. And one final word from Oksana with the Ukrainian National Women's League of America.
So I've always known of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. I remember even as a young child coming to the resort Suizilka in the Catskills, and remembering these women. They would have this big event. It was called Dain Suizanka, and they would all gather in their finest embroidery and have a beautiful concert and display different various customs and assorted lectures and things like that. It was open to the public. It was very interesting. But I somehow never joined the organization until a friend of mine convinced me in 2015. She goes, we have such a great time. Why not just come and sit down and have a glass of wine with us and, see what it's about. And this was in 2015, and I very quickly became immersed in the organization, becoming president of our branch and then of New Jersey and the social media chair for the organization and public relations chair and so on and so forth. And I've got such tremendous respect for the organization. Our organization is very transparent in what we do. And because we're an all-volunteer board, donations, they just go further because all of the donations essentially go to exactly the cause that we're trying to collect for. So I really encourage everyone to donate. Every little bit helps. And for more information, to see what is being done with the organization, what we do with those donations, please visit our website and UNWLA.org. Follow us on our Facebook page or Instagram, or sign up for our newsletter. And it's, there's a very detailed accounting of everything that is done with the donations. And because we have been working in Ukraine for so many years that we have like a trusted set of people, sort of boots on the ground in Ukraine. And, we can ensure that the donations go to do the most good. So thank you for your support. Thank you for allowing me to join this panel. And I hope that, together we can do great things for Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Again, I posted it in the comments earlier, the specific Facebook link for donating. But if typing out a really long Facebook link is inconvenient for you, you can also be routed there via babayagamask.com. Yes, it is the title of my most recent novel based on my own Ukrainian heritage. This program has been called Story Stop United for Ukraine because it is based on a Story Stop tour of events that I have been doing for a number of years now, where based in the idea that every single one of us has a story, whether it is our own, whether it is our family, but every single one of us has a story to add to the human conversation, and those stories should be heard. Now, I've done these events across the United States, virtually and in person. And when I started doing them, I had no idea I would have the opportunity to have a conversation with a panel of amazing Ukrainian women, speaking of Ukrainian artistry and Ukrainian traditions. I had no idea we'd ever need to do a panel on Ukrainian aid. But here we are. And I have been so honored to bring these voices together, so honored to be able to speak with all of you today. Thank you to all of my speakers. Thank you for all of you who have tuned into this event, whether you're watching with us live and I have said your name, thanking you for donation, whether you're catching things a little bit later on. But thank you for paying attention to Ukrainian stories. The world thanks you for that. Have a good night.